Hey everyone, welcome to Watch It, Drop It, Wash It, Paint It, and in this video I'm going to be painting up one of these hobgoblins from that new Dominion collection set box. This is going to be a Hobgrot Slittaz, and this is, what was this, the totem bearer, isn't it? I'm going to be speed painting this. If you're unaware, I massively enjoy speed painting, love it. The faster I can get my miniatures to the table, the better. And for that, I'm probably going to use some contrast paints just to let you know. Now, I have primed this up front using Army Painter's Colour Primer Skeleton Bone. I would normally, especially given that I'm going to use some contrast paints, normally use the CITADEL Colour Primer Wraithbone, which is made especially for contrast paints. But two reasons. One, I'm not going to use that much contrast paint. Two, that I would like this to look quite warm, and I think it's going to save me an extra coat of contrast paint because this skeleton bone colour primer is just a little bit darker than that wraith bone, so it's going to be a bit closer to the skin tone that I want. And then the third, I said two reasons, but the three, I've just got loads and loads of that skeleton bone colour primer left and not very much of wraith bone. And four, I said two reasons, let's have four. A fourth reason is just so you guys can see and get your own opinion whether you think that you actually need the contrast primer. I pick it because it's only a little bit extra money, and if it has any extra bonus effect on contrast paints, you know, I'm prepared to spend an extra $1. The first thing I will do is just attach this to some sort of miniature holder. This is a hobby holder. There's a link in the description below if you would like to check it out. I'm using Putty Direct in it, but normally you've got screw caps, so you can screw on and off as many miniatures as you want, depending on how many bottle caps you've got, but I've got lots, so I could do lots of miniatures at once. The next thing I'm going to do is grab some contrast paint. I'm going to start with the skin because the skin's the sort of most inner part of this miniature, and I like to do that first so you're not catching it once you're moving outwards from the miniature. So what I'm going to need to do, you can see it's all separated. I'm going to go shake that for an indefinite period of time, probably 2, 3, 10, half an hour. I'm going to be back. Okay, so that was probably only about a minute, but it feels like 10 minutes, you know, when you're gyrating your wrists back and forth. It wears you out. It wears you out. The next thing I'm going to do is grab one of these wash wizards that I use from the same company as the hobby holder, and all this is for is just to stop that accidental spillage that we've all done with Agrax Earthshade. And it does the same with washers, it does the same with contrast. Anything a bit liquidy, it just stops it being knocked over. You get the idea. So I'm going to use Redgrass Games brushes. I think these work very, very well for contrast. And normally I'd be using a size 2 here, my bigger brush, but this miniature is just small, and I want to be, I'm just going to get straight to the point and be accurate and not accidentally get it all over the place. So we're going to use this Aggaros Dunes and just start applying this all over his skin. Any bit of skin we can find, just one thickish coat. And that was what I was saying about the reason of choosing the Army Painter's primer here, the skeleton bone, instead of using CITADEL's contrast primer like I normally would. This is going to be warmer, it's going to be darker, it's already a little bit towards that Aggaros Dunes shade, and this hopefully will just get it to the skin tone that I was looking for with hopefully just one coat of this. When I was planning this and thinking about it, I was thinking, oh, I'll just do 2 coats of Aggaros Dunes, and that's probably about the yellowy, browny skin tone I'm interested in achieving. But why do two coats when you can just do one? Getting that speed paint mode activated. Now, I didn't glue down the actual totem for this exact reason. I can just whip that off now, and then we can paint the inside of this arm with super ease. That's great. When I finish the miniature, I will glue that into position, but that is exactly why I only did a dry fit there, just so I can pop that on and off as I'm trying to reach parts of painting up this guy. Well, I feel like you could paint him up like this, add a load of blood to his wrist, and it's just like he's been de-handed, he's been Jaime Lannistered, right? And just need to add this contrast to his feet as well. Well, his feet, his legs, all of this is under area. Is underneath, his downside is below his waist. The action zone, we'll fill this all in. And then we're gonna, after we've covered all of that, move on to his face. This bit's good. Well, I say this bit's going to take a little bit of accuracy, a little bit of care, but is it? Because, as I mentioned, I'm not going to paint that much with contrast paints on this hobgoblin, so anywhere it's going to be real paints, it's going to go very easily over the top of this quite light Aggaros Dunes. So that skin's come out pretty much exactly how I wanted it to, how I envisaged it. And it didn't catch fire when I used the non-contrast, primer. I don't know if it worked as perfectly well as it would without, but it's just a good demonstration that you don't have to use that primer. Now, for these ropes that he's got, I'm going to use this Gryph-Hound Orange. I ummed and ahed I'm basing this, you probably can already tell, I'm basing it on the reference material that comes, in the box set. So there's plenty of pictures of how GW have painted their army, and I'm just copying along. That I like what they've done. It means I don't have to think too hard about the color schemes I want. And if you're new to painting, that's like quite a nice way of starting, just copying along with artwork. It lets you just hone your skills as a painter, not necessarily as like a creative type who has to use their imagination. Obviously, paint these whatever color you want. If you've got ideas and you want to go for it, go for it. But if you're panicking and you don't know where to begin, it's often nice just to copy along. That's why I'm making these tutorials, right? It's where I started. I followed along on tutorials, and then tutorials ran out, and there weren't as many YouTubers as there is now. So that's kind of where I got going, and it's nice to follow somebody's paint for paint tutorial, I think. So we're going to go for something like that with all the ropes painted up. If there are any extras, there's a couple up here. Don't miss these two on the skull here. I'll go and tidy this up off camera and just make sure I've covered all of that correctly with contrast. So this sculpt's got a couple of skulls dangling from the totem, and Skeleton Horde is the perfect contrast paint for that. Now, do remember I did prime this in Skeleton Bone, so that's already a bony colour. So if you don't want to use contrast, you could just splash on a little bit of wash to that and highlight it up, and it's also gonna look like a skull. But I think just a quick Skeleton Horde contrast and those skulls are gonna be done. So I didn't notice until I started adding the detail, but that skeleton's got a bit of rope there, so I'll go back and add the orange to that. So next up, I'm going to use Wyldwood, and I'm going to tone this down about 50-ish with the contrast medium that you can buy, just sort of watering it down, diluting it, and hopefully just making it a little bit lighter. Now, Wyldwood is very, very dark. It's quite stark, so it can lose some of sort of the detail in the colour transition. So a little bit of watering down for me goes a long way, and hopefully that's going to look awesome when it dries. I'm going to paint up all of the straps holding up his armour, any wood that I can find, sort of the spear and the top of the spear as well, and that sort of thing. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break from contrast painting, although we've done most of it now, so we'll probably could. I'm thinking about using it as a wash in a little bit. We'll see when I get there. But for now, I'm going to paint on his nails using Necromancer Cloak by the Army Painter. It's really just a very dark grey. That's going to work well for the base coat before I add just a highlight to this, I think, and that's as simple as his nails and his teeth are going to be. I'm then going to just finish off his teeth and his nails with a thin line of Filthy Soot, a lighter grey, just to sort of really pop out each of those little bits of detail. And that's that. That's going to be that ticked off, and we can carry on with the rest of the miniature. Next up, I'm going to paint on some of the metallics. I'm going to use some Darkstar molten metals. If you've not seen this range, it's some really, really impressive metallic paints. Now, I often just go to my Army Painter paints because they've got the basic colour range and they're fantastic paints. They go on really easily. Normally only one coat, with the exception of maybe the gold needed a bit of extra work. But they're just my go-to. They are solid paints. But the Darkstar molten metals, it's all in the name, guys. It is like painting on some molten metals of those colours. And when there's lots and lots of metallics on a miniature like there is on this one, I go to this range to give me a bigger selection of slightly different coloured silvers, golds, bronzes, that sort of thing. So I'm going to start with steel, and that's a very dark silver colour, and we'll be painting up all of his armour with this. Carrying on with Darkstar's molten metal range, I'm going to use their aged copper. That's going to be to paint on some of these dangly bits of the Hobnob's totem, and I don't know what these would be, some sort of charm or something. I'm just going to pick them almost at random, but it's not going to be random because I'm going to spread them out between the two colours that I'm going to use, but essentially whatever. I don't think it really matters which ones we do, but I think it'll be more aesthetically pleasing if they're not all one colour in a single column or something like that, or a row. I'll also grab his little crotch charm using this same aged copper, and all of these studs that are on his armor, I'm going to also just dab on the whole thing in this, and just mixing up the coloring on his armor and giving it a little bit more interest in the detail. For the other charms, I'm also going to use Darkstar's Molten Metal range. We're just getting such a lengthy title, but I'm going to use their copper, and it's a much brighter one. I kind of might want this to be darker, but we'll see how it looks. If you're using Darkstar or any metallics, guys, just pick whichever ones you would like to put together. There's so many metallics. You can't really go wrong. This is going to look awesome. I just would have liked it to be a darker copper if I could find one that looked still copper. I want that like ready look, but I just wanted it to not be quite as bright as this. But you know, we'll see how it looks. If you don't like it, don't pick these two metallics. Pick whichever you would like. Switching to Army Painter's metallics now, I'm going to use their machine gun metal, their dark silver, and I'm going to be painting on some more silvers, but basically any of the weaponry, any of the spikes, any of these bits, and these are going to be the bits that I really don't tone down at all, and I'm just going to highlight up into a shinier silver with some edge highlighting. So any of the sort of flat areas is probably a good way of describing that. But I'll also get the grenade in his hand, and we will tone that down just because it's got a lot of recesses and I want to get some different depth to it. So again, I'm going to stick with the contrast, I think, and try using that as a wash, as a shade when we get there. So back on with a little bit of contrast paint now, and I'm really just going to use this Basilicanum Grey as a wash essentially. I'm going to be quite pinpoint with it. I'm going to get most of that grenade because it's just got a lot of recesses, and I'll pop that back out. And again, I'm going to do all of the helmet because that's quite flat, but it's got these big recesses, so I don't think I can do that without creating tight lines. So I just paint it all, and I think that'll look great. As for his udders and these other studs that are around, I'm just going to dab a bit on the actual circle and around it just to give that a bit of shade. Not going to go for the armor in the background. And then the runes are held together with these sort of chain links. I'm going to just paint all of those. I did them in silver. You don't need to do them in silver first. I was just seeing how it looked. I think this will cover it, and then we could highlight it in silver, that sort of thing. I'm going to leave all of the flat bits of metal without any wash on because I would just highlight those up, and I think that'll work a treat. And then finally, the sort of runes, these symbols on each of these charms, I'm going to very carefully, if I can, try and flood inside those runes with this, just like a wash, just to make those pop out. Try not to get too much on the surface because I'll just have to tidy that up. We'll start highlighting up this metal next. I'm just going to take a little bit of that copper and just paint it on the tip of each udder, just to bring a bit of colour back into these studs. Just the tip, I think that's all it's going to take. And maybe just a little bit on these rings that were on his face, just to give an indication that they were a different colour. Oh, this is so shiny. I'm then going to use Army Painter's Claymore blade to highlight up basically everything else. So we'll paint back in some little studs on his grenade. He's got a couple of these, edge highlight this nail running through it, or the pin, can't tell what that is. Get some highlighting on the handle. Well, there's plenty of studs. I won't do them all on camera, but yeah, I'll just pop some of those details back out. I'm also going to go around, and again, won't do it all on camera, but I'll edge highlight up this steel and just catch the entire edge of each plate of his armor. So we'll get both his leg armors. Ooh, I slipped, caught his chin, but yeah, that's roughly where I wanted it. I'll get his helmet. That made me have to do his helmet now. Again, I'll do most of this off camera, but just give you a general idea, just along all the edges. There's also a bunch of studs. We'll catch those on here too. There's plenty of sharp edges on these sort of spears. One's on his helmet. There we go. Just use this side of the blade. Side of the blade. We'll use the edge of the blade and the side of the brush, and then the spear on top of his staff as well. We can carefully highlight that up, get a nice shine to that. Same down the sides. He's got his blades on his back again. We'll just try and catch the edges, just brighten them up a little bit. And the edges of his handles here too. And then I'm also going to use the same silver and the same technique, try and show you one, I'm going to catch it a little bit off the brush, only a little bit on the brush, and just try and not even accurately, but just quite roughly catch a bunch of the edges of these charms. And we'll catch some of the studs as well. We'll just rough it up as though, you know, these charms have been rubbing against each other, taken off, lost some of the actual colour, and it's just looking like it's gone down to the silver or the actual metal. You could imagine these may be painted, or you don't have to highlight these up differently. You could leave them that base colour, but I think this will be a nice effect and add a lot to the miniature. And that is it, guys. Now, I'm not going to lie, it did take a little bit longer than that Gut Ripper's miniature that I painted up earlier, but, you know, there was a lot of metallics, there was a lot of actual painting. I couldn't abuse the contrast as much as I wanted. That skin tone came out exactly as I wanted, using that skeleton bone colour primer and then the contrast on top. That is what I was looking for. I think it's representative of the reference material in the game. And you can also see I went away and based it as well. That took a little bit more time, but I did two at the same time. So we're still talking maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes a miniature here, which, you know, for that time cost, I think these have come out remarkably well. I'm very, very happy with that. Guys, let me know in the comments below if you would like to see some more miniatures painted, and more importantly, which ones you would like to see keep coming. Keep those suggestions going. I'm sort of, you can probably tell I'm building up to the harder, more exciting miniatures and getting some practice in with the sort of grunts. Anyway, guys, thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Now I have primed this up. Now,